I am so conservative.
Rationalized in my head. These are things I read in
And
the
I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had
remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah.
I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative.
And welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is just a bit of a trigger warning for those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones. I really am so conservative, I can't turn left even when I'm driving. In addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection.
Yes, we do.
This week, Dr. Vaughn Mancha, who has concerns about the claims of Darwinism, joins us to talk about epigenetics, the sins of the fathers. I can't even hardly say that one. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw its shadow, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop resource for half-baked heresies, dubious doctrines, and other ideas whose time has gone. World's End Theology Outlet, our regular legal disclaimer. Our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that would be Dr. Vaughn Mancha, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the Webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. The satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. Our regular notices: the opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy it, or if it really annoys you and you want to inflict it on someone else to ensure your continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And as you do, never fear, this webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. And now, introducing our special guest, Dr. Vaughn Mancha. Greetings from our fake studio audience. I'm sure that really is exciting. How are you doing today, Dr. Mancha?
Doing fine. I love that Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. That's from Car Talk, isn't it?
Actually, I heard that one about 40 years ago, but I think they did use it on Car Talk, yeah. So, well, you'll hear more echoes of Car Talk as we go on. So
yeah, probably. Ron's likes to listen to all of that kind of stuff. I rarely listen to anything except audiobooks. I love audiobooks. So, and Ron, I don't know if you noticed, I accidentally used our old intro.
What was different?
Like everything.
Okay. I thought, oh, you mean the old, you mean the old pre-recorded
video, yeah.
Yeah. Was that an accident or what?
It was an accident. Yeah, I have them from time to time. That's what happens when you get over 70. You click stuff and you go, I didn't mean to do that.
No, I didn't mean to. Maybe you should just delete that. I thought you were referring to your spoken intro. That sounds.
No, the spoken intro is pretty much the same. I'm still just warning people. I'm so conservative. I can't turn left even when I'm driving. So if you're easily offended, just go away.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Mancha, we are going to, if I can, here we go. Share screen. We're going to bring
Are
this
you
up
having
here.
a Biden moment here, Don? Is this going to be?
No, I'm just abiding my time here. No.
I'm thinking, the new name for this is going to be a Biden moment, right?
Yeah, well, okay. It's not completely. So here are some of the credentialing and publications that Dr. Mancha has done. Biology, a degree in medicine, boarded family practice, medical research scientist, a medical research scientist.
Is that the same person there, Dr. Van Mancha?
Yeah.
He was really different
Yeah,
with a beard.
that's when I was looking good. Yeah, when I retired, I started growing a beard.
You retired from shaving in addition to other
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
I got so lazy I wouldn't shave.
Yeah, well, I've been that way like all of my life, so whatever. So, okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is say the word
Epigenetics.
epigenetics.
Yeah.
I should be able to say that I know what both of them are. I just don't seem to be able to put them together in one breath. Epigenetics. Okay, we got it. So for the average person that is tuning in that has no clue what we're talking about, what is a layman-friendly definition of epigenetics?
Well, we used to think that you'd have a mutation to the DNA, and that would cause a change, and natural selection would act on it. That's neo-Darwinism. It's very simple, in fact. However, we've discovered that little tags are put on top of the DNA, epi, and it plays the genes in different ways. And so we don't need natural selection anymore, nor do we need mutations. And those are the core tenets of neo-Darwinism. They've been completely overturned by epigenetics, which is rather exciting.
You're saying it plays the mutation different ways?
Well, no. Say you've got a string of beads that are your DNA. A mutation would cause a change in one of the beads. And that's what's proposed under neo-Darwinism, that a bead is changed and that it causes a better protein and it's naturally selected for. Epigenetics takes the same beads and changes how they're used. So
how the genes are played. It's kind of like how you play a song by Bob Dylan.
Exactly. It's like a piano, and the keys stay the same, but you play the key tunes in different ways. That's epigenetics. It's like music.
Just happens, or?
Yeah. I mean, it really just happened the last 15 years.
I mean, these changes happen. They just...
Oh, yeah. We have it on all our DNA. It's on every organism that's ever lived, and it goes all the way back to the beginning of time. If you look at older organisms, epigenetics is controlling things, and we literally did not know it was there. Yeah, it controls the way the genes are played, whether something's turned on or turned off. Cancer, for instance. Cancers are not a mutation per se, and then bad stuff happens. That can happen, but the majority of the time, what happens is a gene that should be turned on to protect you from cancer gets accidentally turned off due to smoking or something else. And then the cancer pops out. It's a different way of looking at things.
So because I always thought that cancer was a mutation.
Well, that's why they taught it that way for years.
Right.
Now we know that it's epi changes that's causing it for the most part.
And the epi change could be caused by what?
Well, that's where it's fascinating. That's the topic of what we're talking about, the sins of the father. It's actually changed by your interactions socially with people, your parents, the bacteria that you're around, the food that you eat, everything in the environment changes it.
So we're not talking about changes that will lead to a higher form of life that could be used to explain Darwinian evolution. We're talking about changes that explain things like cancer.
No, but no, it can actually explain how things evolved over time. Darwin posits that mutations occur and then natural selection, but there's been a paper out that says these guys, Dermot Schmidt, studied the time it takes for two mutations to occur, and they discovered it was 9 million years for just two mutations. So even though we have mutations in our DNA, purposeful mutations are not explained by the old system, whereas epigenetics guides mutations. It actually allows certain mutations to occur that are useful, and it's a completely different way of looking at things.
All right, now we're going to go. You have an article that you wanted to bring up here, but
Yeah.
we have a question. It's kind of a good question, I think. Jennifer asks, is he saying social interactions can change your DNA?
Absolutely. Believe it or not, there was a study that showed that people that have come back from the war areas and have PTSD, they could describe the epigenetic tags and actually predict their possibility of suicide. I mean, that's never been done before.
Wow.
Is this a controversial thing that you're saying, or is
No,
this pretty much
no,
accepted?
Okay. The total number of articles in epigenetics in the last 10 years is 143,000 articles. Okay, compare that to neo-Darwinism. There's only 300 articles on it.
Wow.
It's blowing it out of the water. Everyone knows it's here, but there's a lot of older guys that don't want to give up what they've believed all these years.
Right.
So how does this, go ahead.
They're committed to it. So here's an article that he wanted to kind of touch on. Why is this one important?
This is a landmark article. Number one, because it was in Nature Journal. Okay, of all the articles that people read in a year, half of them come from the Nature Journal. That's how important this article is. So these guys basically came up with this title, Does Evolutionary Theory Need a Rethink? And this was 10 years ago, right? And when I read this thing, I about fell out of the chair. Here's Nature challenging evolution. I thought it was a settled fact. That's what I learned in college. It's a fact like gravity. And these guys were poking holes in it. And so I dedicated myself to reading, and I've read at this point 6,500 articles on epigenetics and other things related to biology in the last 10 years.
So earlier I heard you say that epigenetics could explain evolution.
Correct.
How does it challenge evolution?
The theory of evolution, again, the simple way to say it is a mutation in natural selection. Epigenetics doesn't need that. It absolutely doesn't need it. It takes the genes that are there and uses them in different ways.
So this doesn't disprove Darwinian evolution, is what
That's
you're saying?
correct. It bypasses Darwinian evolution.
Bypass.
The word evolution is a synonym. It can mean changes in a star, how your car drives down the street. And that's the problem. Everyone throws the word evolution around, but really when you say evolution, you're supposed to be saying neo-Darwinism. That's the real evolution.
So in other words, what we're challenging here is not evolution per se, but Darwinian.
That's correct.
Evolution.
Yeah, this is a new extended evolution, but it works so differently that it's leaving everybody in a question, that, hey, this stuff looks designed more than ever. I mean, it looked designed before. Now it's really looking designed. And it brings up a lot of different things. For instance, niche theory. Niche theory, like a niche picture thing. The perfect example of that is a beaver. Okay, a beaver will create a dam, and the things that the beaver does actually controls and helps all kinds of other animals that live around it. But how would a mutation in natural selection change everything at the same time? There's no explanation for it. But this new theory accepts niche theory and things like that. Development's a big thing. How do you go from a single cell organism in your mother to develop 200 tissue types and organs, all of which have the same DNA, and yet they have completely different expressions? It's not explained by mutations in natural selection.
So whereas mutations was kind of like the mechanism.
That's right.
That it was explaining evolution. Now epigenetics is replacing the mechanism.
That's correct. But the mutations that epigenetics is involved in are biased. They're directed to a certain way. In other words, for 50 years, 60 years, we were thinking that the DNA replicated itself and a mutation error would occur. However, we've now realized when DNA goes to RNA, and RNA, by the way, is the stuff that you got a shot in the COVID. That was RNA they injected you with. But when DNA goes to RNA, there's 400 times the number of errors that are occurring. And they're being guided by epigenetics to do different things. So, I mean, it's amazing.
So,
okay, I need to interrupt for 1 second here, because I can sort of sense that there's going to be some out there going, wait a minute, are you saying that humans evolved from apes?
No,
that is not even part of this discussion, is it?
well, actually, there is a slide we'll discuss that shows that. Okay, but I'm not making that claim. In fact, I'll explain why those kind of arguments are silly in a couple slides further.
Okay, good.
We like silly. We're all about that.
Yeah.
So these
No,
guys,
we like satire.
Yeah.
Silly.
Well,
Yeah, maybe we like.
nevertheless, these guys threw down the gauntlet 10 years ago. I mean, we're just talking 10 years, and it's just been a flood since then.
Really?
So we have, for example, this PubMed. Is that you go and drink or what?
No, for doctors, it's a pub production. No, PubMed is like the database to look up all the different journal articles out there. And if you put in the term epigenetics on the left-hand side, you see how the green is going flying up, and it's got 143,000 journals in the last 10 years. And then you put in the word modern synthesis on the right, which is neo-Darwinism, the theory of evolution, and there's only about 300 hits. I mean, it's kind of like you've seen in a Japanese film when a Japanese guy in a business messes up and everyone just kind of distance themselves from him and go to different parts of the room. I mean, nobody wants to be around him, and they're not fighting for its honor. They're kind of embarrassed that they've missed it this bad.
Well, yeah, kind of embarrassed. The problem always is with stuff like this is you see something, you develop a theory on that you think explains it, but you're lacking information that you don't know you're lacking.
Well, that's true. Epigenetics are just discovering a lot of it, but the major parts of it are really pretty well established. I mean, we got thousands of articles establishing a large parts of it.
Right. Right.
But just to show you, okay, I'm in about 10 different creation versus atheist groups on Facebook, right? And these guys are pretty clever. And I'm publishing these articles that's blowing apart neo-Darwinism, and they don't mess with me anymore. They used to jump in there like, oh, you can't be, and now, you know what their argument is now? Said, well, how does the new evolution explain God? Okay. And so I show them a graph that 91%, according to Pew, 91% believed in neo-Darwinism that are atheists. I said, well, this is your God. And they'll go, and they're upset. They know they can't fight it anymore.
When you talk about epigenetics controlling it and kind of steering these things in certain ways, that sounds like intelligent design to me.
It is. It's an extra level. I mean, we're talking DNA. Okay, just let's take the human DNA. It's got 3.4 billion letters. Okay, on the back of the envelope, the odds of that lining up like that is 4 to the power of 3.4 billion. It's an incredible number. It's totally unrealistic. However, epigenetics adds thousands and thousands on top of that of information. I mean,
that's exponentially greater than the number of atomic particles in the universe.
Exactly. Just one.
I mean, just beyond exponentially greater.
Yeah. Now, but they don't really care about abilities. What they say is, well, there's a multiverse, and maybe we're just lucky and God, and you're going like, get out of here.
Well, how is that? That's not metaphysical, is it? That's not a metaphysical.
No, well, you know what I do? I said, well, if there's a multiverse, then it means there has to be a omnipotent, omnipresent God in one of those universes. And if he's present in one universe, that means he's present in all universes. And then they can.
I mean, think about I want to think about the metaverse, multiverse. I mean, come on. That's inherently unprovable. All you're saying is, our mathematics allows for it. Well, yeah sure, but you haven't proven existence.
One of the things that I often have to point out in some of these discussions to unbelievers, especially, is you and I both have creation stories. I know you don't like to think of yours as that, but that's what it is.
Yeah,
because you cannot get back to the beginning and actually demonstrate how everything exploded into everything from nothing. You can't demonstrate that. You just have to believe that as part of your creation story. And then you have to suppose that the Oparin hypothesis is correct, and that in this primordial soup, wherever they came from, no one knows, Lightning struck it as it was sloshing around, and 21 amino acids came into existence, bang, stuck together, and you now have a cell. How does that work? You don't know. It's a crazy story.
By the way, I just read an article by Robert Shapiro, who's really a great thinker, and he said the letter of the DNA alphabet, cytosine or C, is critical for little tags to occur on it. So that's where epigenetics occurs. You've got to have the C. And he said there's nobody that's able to synthesize it under, abiotic conditions. And and so basically the most important, it's so important to the DNA that we call it the fifth nucleotide, because it controls all the. So here we are. They may argue that we can get some tyrosine, maybe some adenine, but you can't get these others. And more importantly, even if you were given a universe full of A, T, C's, and G's, and that they were all in the right enantiomeric shape, and they have to have a D curvature to them at the chemical level. It's called an enantiomer. Even if you had a whole universe, they would not be able to bump into each other and make something. The time it would take would be incredible.
God, I can recall one time when nothing exploded and created everything. That was critical social justice, but that's another topic.
That's another topic. It seems to me really very problematic to start from nothing and assume it. Oh, that's where I was going to go. When you're talking about individuals going to this multiverse idea, now that's an assertion. It's a theory without evidence.
Correct.
But you need that when your evolutionary theory doesn't work. Nelson Crick did the same thing fundamentally when push came to shove, and he came to realize that even though he's one of the discoverers of DNA, he knows how all of that works, and he recognizes that it could not happen on this planet. There's just not enough time. And so he went for directed panspermia.
Yeah. That
didn't solve the problem. It just moved it back in time to a distant part of the
10 yards back and punting. Yeah. No, it didn't change a thing. Francis Crick, by the way, he was the big LSD tripper. No kidding. They think he might have been on LSD when he came up with the idea of the DNA double helix.
And yet he is still considered legit anyways, right?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, he stole this poor lady, Rosalind Franklin's X-ray work, which gave them the double helix appearance. And somebody took it out of lab and handed it to him, and you would think he would give her credit. He didn't even. He ran her down in his books. I mean, everyone is rediscovering what a jerk this guy was. And so I don't know.
Who was the other guy? Crick and
Watson. Yeah,
okay.
Watson. Yeah.
And didn't Francis Crick later in life believe in panspermia?
Yeah, that's the theory that he was talking about. Right. He and Frederick Hoyle believed in it, and even Richard Dawkins talked about the possibility when he was being interviewed by.
I believe he was from an alien, but
So the Guardian. Why is the Guardian important, and what is this article there?
Well, this article, "Do We Need a New Theory of Evolution?" is very similar to the other one, except it came out this year, so it was 9 years between it. And I mean, Twitter exploded. All these biologists and everything got online, and they were fighting for their theory. And in the Guardian, they mentioned this professor who's one of the ones that proposed a new synthesis or extended synthesis. And I can never pronounce his name. It's Pigliucci or something like that. He's a philosopher and biologist, and those guys are better because they think through what they say. And one student said, "Isn't this just kind of a culture war between the older neo-Darwinists and the new guys that like epigenetics?" He said, "Yes, it's the culture war, and one that we're going to win." And half the room broke out cheering. Now, the significance of that is astounding. When I was at the peak of biology and evolution in the 70s, if I stood up and said, "Hey, everybody, neo-Darwinism is going to be overthrown in 40 years," they would laugh at me, throw me out of the room. But
But is this like one of the quietest murders you've ever witnessed?
it's everyone's kind of like, oh, don't look at the guy in the closet there who's dead now after 80 years of pushing down your throat.
This is the first time hearing about it.
I know, it's 80 years of pushing it down your throat. Oh, by the way, just forget we said that. It's really.
I think pretty soon, Don, everybody will be able to pronounce epigenetics.
Yeah, I think there's more and more, and there's a lot of pop science because epigenetics affects psychiatry, all kinds of things. I mean, it's not just limited to biology in a lab or something.
Yeah, I mean, it could explain, why I'm going bald. And
it will.
It does. You're telling me it does.
I'm not kidding. You can go into PubMed and write balding and epigenetics, and there will be 200 articles on it. They're already looking at it.
So these epigenetics is basically saying we're in a way there's a kind of a computer analogy here because a microchip is a bunch of switches. Is this a valid analogy between the switches in DNA?
Yeah, well, let's look at your hair as an analogy. Testosterone is a hormone that affects that, but it's affecting the growth of the follicle and everything else. So what's happening is there's probably a gene that should be on that's getting turned off. I'm just guessing.
This is a real turnoff. I want you.
A real turnoff. And so subsequently, the hair comes out for that reason. It's not that your head mutated. DNA
that might have actually happened.
But you see what I'm saying? But okay, to wait on mutations, as I mentioned in that earlier study, can take literally millions of years. It's just slow. Epigenetics happens fast. It's 100,000 times as fast as mutations.
It's kind of like as long as it takes for Democrats to change their positions on certain things.
So that would explain. I've asked my barber about this, and he never could really answer me why I seem to have less hair on my head and more hair now coming out of my ears, which is really bothersome. And I said, did it just get tired and go, I'm not going to go that high anymore?
Yeah. It's altitude.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. So
are they talking about controlling these switches at some point, trying to control them?
And they are doing it with regard to cancer. There are drugs that turns these switches towards the correct direction because when they're turned on in the wrong direction, it's causing cancer. But it's very difficult.
That could mean a cure, right?
Absolutely. We're talking a cure for cancer. Okay, of those 143,000 articles on epigenetics, a good 35,000 were on cancer and epigenetics.
Wow, that's amazing.
We now know what's causing it.
You have an article on here about Eugene Koonin. Who is he? Why should we care that he writes 700 articles?
And can epigenetics help his hairline?
Yeah. Okay. E.B. Koonin is he's like one of the most important people in the field of evolution. The reason I say that is look at the bottom. He is cited by 252,652 sciences. I don't know if you know, but if you read a journal article, you're lucky to see it cited by 30 or 40 people. I mean, this guy is absolutely a king when it comes to the field.
Academia EDU tells me I've been cited by 12,000 people, but I don't believe it. They're just trying to get me to pay money.
Yeah. Well,
so I can find out who they are.
Yeah, this is a little different in his case. But, okay, so at the 150th anniversary of Darwin, which was in 2009, he wrote this article that it blew everybody on their backside. He said, here we are. He said, and yet what is astounding is there's not a single tenet of the modern synthesis, neo-Darwinism, that isn't completely overturned. He said, not to mince words, neo-Darwin is finished. I mean, and they couldn't believe what he said, but then a lot of people started to come out and say it because you can't challenge this guy. I mean, geez, the guy's, wow. He's a giant, but he laid it out there, and so if you read his articles, they talk about all these things, and it's astounding though. But when you look at a thought leader like that, he really stands as a beacon on their side. And everybody else is just saying, well, I can't disagree with that. I'm not going to talk about it out loud. but they all know it's the case.
Yeah. Well, there's some things that we typically don't want to talk about out loud either, because they are very popular teachers within certain segments of the church. And one of them is very concerned about your spiritual health.
Yeah, you might. I guess that's one way of putting it, Don. Yeah. Our friends at World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop resource for half-baked heresies and dubious doctrines and other ideas whose time has gone, have some questions for you. Have you been feeling, shall we say, uncomfortable with the gift of prophecy lately? Has Satan been giving you that bound-up sensation deep inside? Are things just not moving like they used to? Then we have the anointing just for you. Suzanne Hinn's Holy Ghost Enema, the only enema to use if your engine is not revving up. Its unique formula moves out the old and brings in the new. It restores jerking and shaking so you can get back in the river and keep the blessing. And it helps you finish the business God has called you to do. Before you know it, you too will be declaring and decreeing electoral victory, for your favorite politicians. You'll execute judgment on global pandemics, blowing them away so they never return. And God will supply you with all the jet planes you need to make sure you keep on moving. Suzanne Hinn's old-fashioned, ready-to-use Holy Ghost Enema. It'll loosen what binds you at World's End Theology Outlet. So,
boy, that's a new and improved commercial there, Ron.
People lining up for that.
Do you have a reform enema?
Yeah, I bet you there is one. Yeah, probably. I can make one if you don't.
I sometimes worry for them.
Some of y'all haven't had the reformed enemy yet.
They just can't move it through sometimes.
It shows that you don't.
So, all right. So, just another rewind. Remember, I'm old and I'm slow sometimes on the uptake, and I go back and I go, okay. And we're going to talk about this. You said in a little bit. There's no evidence that we've had the kind of mutations or epigenetic changes, let's say, that would cause, I don't know, a flower to evolve into being Johnny Cash. There's nothing like that, right?
Well, I'd be planting those seeds every day if there was.
Do you want to move ahead to that slide? It's about 8 slides forward. That very analogy that you gave.
Okay, well, we'll get to that because you have some other things here that you wanted to kind of point out, like that one.
Okay, well, then we'll reach the flower one because there's an exact thing where I show a daffodil in a human being. Okay, so this is a side by side, a take home of the theory of evolution on the left and epigenetics on the right. In the theory of evolution on the left, you have random mutations, the gold star that you see, right?
Yeah.
And then natural selection fixes that mutation if it makes a better body. And that's very, very slow. Does this happen? Yes, it happens, but it's pretty daggum rare. If you do a search on microevolution, you'll only find about 1,300 articles on it in the last 10 years.
Oh.
However, they need to redo it to include epigenetics. So they may, in fact, have been describing epigenetics. On the right-hand side, we have epigenetics. There's no mutations. There's epi tags. The purple you see is on top of the DNA. There's no natural selection because there's no mutation, and it causes rapid changes to the body. So this is a good side-by-side simplistic view of the whole different thing. If you just keep this, memorize this one slide, you can understand the two.
I have to make sure I understand the slide that I'm memorizing. Could you go back to it, Don?
I can't. There's a lot of things I can do. You'd be amazed.
Yeah.
I have control.
So because I can't really read the label above the star on the left-hand side.
Well, it just says mutation.
Okay.
How about that? Is that helpful?
Yeah.
And the purple circle says
that represents a tag that sits on top of the DNA. And there's different types of tags. I'll show the next slide will actually show that.
And the significance of the tag is that it
doesn't change the sequence of the DNA. There's no mutations.
And it's a switch.
So it just sits on top of the DNA. It doesn't actually.
And it's a switch. It's one of those switch things.
Correct. Neo-Darwinism is a mutation, random change and then natural selection. This one, no random mutation, a tag. The DNA stays the same.
Okay, let me look here.
This is an example as well. This is your chromosome on the far left in green, and then it unravels into these little basketball-looking things, which are called nucleosomes, and the DNA is wrapped around the nucleosomes. The tags can sit on top of the nucleosome to tighten it up or loosen it. And when it's tightened up, it won't make anything. It won't transcribe anything.
Is there a reason they call it a tag instead of a switch?
I'm just calling it tags.
Oh.
You can call it switch.
Oh, okay.
But there's an example of a tag in red. And you remember I was telling you about the cytosine? It's what's called a methyl group that sits on top of the cytosine in this case. If you notice on the bottom, part of epigenetics includes new types of RNA that we've been discovering in the last 10 years. And guess where it came from? It came from the junk DNA that neo-Darwinists dismissed for the last 60 years. Okay, so they dismissed it for 60 years, and holy cow.
Oh, it's just junk.
Yeah.
Leftover Neanderthal stuff, you know.
Yeah, and here it's coming back with a roar, and they're just they're just saying they can't keep up with all the stuff that junk DNA is doing. And
amazing. So it's kind of like, it's almost like when you said that they can't keep up, it reminds me of when they started using these big particle accelerators back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And they said every day somebody was running down the hallway with some new discovery and now this is happening in epigenetics.
Yeah. Epigenetics is going faster than particle accelerators, though. I mean, okay, on your far left, you have the DNA to RNA to protein. That's what we used to think that Francis Crick discovered. He called it the central dogma, DNA, RNA to protein. But that only includes 2% of things. The junk DNA includes 98%. And you can see the red that's between the little bars there is causing non-coding RNA. And that non-coding RNA is working epigenetically to change how the DNA is turned on and turned off. So the biggest mistake, in my opinion, that neo-Darwinists ever made was the idea of junk DNA. I mean,
so you call it non-coding, but
that's the same as junk. Yeah,
it acts as a switch, which
that's correct.
Makes it sound like it is a code in itself.
Yeah, go back to the previous slide.
Okay.
Okay, if you look at the bottom, there's messenger RNA in green.
Yeah.
Okay. Messenger RNA is what you got with your COVID shot. You got this RNA when your body, it produced spike proteins, and then it died within 10 minutes of you getting the shot. Okay, well, there's this stuff called microRNA, which is junk DNA. The microRNA eats it up, so it doesn't hang around forever, right? That's the reason why your COVID shot only lasted for a little bit. MicroRNA is doing things. So there's all these other forms of RNA that they did not take into account. And I mean, it's really amazing what a colossal failure that believing in that theory was. Honestly, it was. I mean, it just shut down thought, you know. But so in
other words, they were looking for, they knew they needed a better mechanism than mutations, right?
Yeah, but they
so they finally found the mechanism, and it was, of course, a better mechanism than mutations to explain Darwinian evolution. Now they found the actual mechanism.
Correct.
And it doesn't prove Darwinian evolution.
No, it disproves Darwinian completely. I mean, so yeah, it's astounding, really. And not that people know about it.
Now I'm going to interrupt your thought for a moment because I like to do that. No. Bill Barb Swick says James Watson and Francis, it should be Crick. He
corrected it later.
Received the Nobel Prize for detangling the double helix DNA. Upon receiving their award, they referred to the DNA strand as a code. A code is a language. It cannot develop itself, much less any language does not develop by itself. It's a coding and encoding situation that requires a thinking mind to initiate. Couple that with irreducible complexities, and you can only reasonably acknowledge how a creator is needed. In other words, as I posed to atheists, and then doesn't quite go on. But that's pretty true. If there's a coding,
Oh, yeah.
if it is actually a language of some sort, which it arguably is, there had to be an intelligent designer behind it. Languages don't just self-assemble.
Yeah, I mean, I really admire the folks at Discovery, Stephen Myers, Casey Luskin, and Dembski. I mean, it's just astounding the work they did. That first article that I showed you?
Yeah.
Okay. In the article, when they realized that stuff was falling apart, it said maybe they're scared of intelligent design. Intelligent design. I mean, where did that come from? I mean, they just suddenly they realize their paradigm is falling apart, and suddenly intelligent design makes more sense. And they would actually mention intelligent design in that. So it's astounding.
Well, one of the things that we talk about a lot, because we're a mission to cults and non-Christian religions, is when I get phone calls from someone saying, my friend is a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Jehovah's Witness, whatever, I always start off with this, because they want the silver bullet verse. What verse do I give them to get them out? That doesn't exist, really. My position is to say this. Ask them a question. What got you into it? Why do you believe what you believe? Now, ask that question, because you're going to find out what they're invested in. Once you can find out what you're invested in, then you can talk to that issue, because it's going to be different for different people. In this case, they're invested in Darwinian evolution, but it doesn't support itself. There's no scientific evidence that says this is how it happened.
No, I mean, Darwin wrote a lot of things that he would. Now, one of the things about Darwin that was very good is he would say, if we don't figure this out, it will be fatal to my theory. And Sedgwick, Professor Sedgwick, showed him when he was 20 years of age the Cambrian layers. And basically, Darwin used the argument from ignorance. Unless I'll just say that they're probably there. Right, but somebody in the future will find it. He does admit, though, if we don't find it, then it would be fatal to my theory. Well, guess what? In China they have an even better field over there in Shenzhen province, and I mean it's just incredible. And yeah, it's exactly the way it looks. Everything suddenly starts. So but here's the thing: there's all these arguments that have been used past the year, like you can see macro selection, not micro selection, whatever. But this is an ender of the arguments. I mean, we're talking just a sheer volume of journals coming out.
Here's probably one of the reasons why you would say that.
Well, this is a picture which talks about they compared the speed of mutations with the epi mutations. Now, remember, epigenetics doesn't mutate, but it can change, and it can change the tags. And it's going at upwards of 100,000 times faster. This explains how organisms can change in the wild. Like in Tanzania, the cichlid fish, is in one lake, and another lake, it's got the same DNA, but it's got a different shape to it because of epigenetics.
Now, like, for instance, let's say you were trying to explain, just perchance, you were trying to explain how a guy gets off a boat with two of each kind of every animal on the face of the earth, and within a few generations, these animals have gone from, like, we've got from a pair of dogs to now we've got like thousands of different kinds of dogs. We've got two cats, and now we've got big cats, little cats, all kinds of cats all over the world. Could epigenetics have something to do with that?
Yeah, it does have a lot to do with it. Okay, you like to pet your dog, right? Okay, would you believe that your petting the dogs changes your psychological epigenetic profile? And guess what? The dog is getting the pleasure hormones as the skin is stretched down his neck. And the two of you are working together complementary. Neo-Darwinism can't do that. I mean, it's just
explain it.
Yeah, how can you explain that? I mean, we went from wolves that were wild about 20,000 years ago to some guys saying, "Hey, you can pet these things," and then suddenly they domesticated them, and they're actually studying.
How about like really big lizards and then really small lizards?
Well, okay, you know, if you go down to the coral reefs, you can bring these coral fish back that were normally very big, but you put them in your tank and suddenly they're very small. How did that happen? Mutations can't change that
That
fast.
can't be explained by mutations.
No, it isn't explained. Epigenetics makes the whole thing because it's controlled by the environment. So here you got a small fish that would normally be a foot long out in the, you know, it's explaining complexity like, you know, genetics and mutations cannot explain.
And it explains it in such a way that makes it appear there must be an intelligence behind it.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Now, okay, the Darwin of the icon of evolution is the finch in the Galapagos Islands. You know, Darwin was on the Beagle, the ship. He dropped off, and all these little islands down in the Galapagos areas, there's about 8 of them, had different beaks, right? Okay, so about 7 years ago, the scientists studied the DNA that's involved with the beak structure and discovered that the epigenetic tags were different. Mm-hmm. In other words, they changed because epigenetic tags made their beaks change. I mean, it's like you take the Darwin of your theory and you shoot it down. It's just not on it. I mean, you've now got an explanation of that. You know, they had no explanation before.
So,
I mean,
Jennifer,
go ahead.
Jennifer asked a good question that is related, I think, to this because you've raised this a couple of times. If the MA and the VAX, because you talked about the VAX, doesn't remain in the body, why are there so many VAX injuries and deaths? Also, can a person optimize their health by their environment or socializing?
Okay, now one thing is messenger RNA lasts maybe 10 minutes in your body. Think of it if your messenger RNA lasted more, it would keep producing stuff. You would grow bones that are abnormal or other things. It's meant to dissolve rapidly. By the way, that explains that the RNA world cannot be the beginning of life. How could you get an RNA string that could survive more than 10 minutes to then form DNA in reverse? Okay, but as far as the VAX injuries, I'll have to admit ignorance on that. I do not study that a great deal. I will say that I did not get a vaccine this year, and the reason is I got Omicron last year, and Omicron is the derivative of the new one. So I'm guessing that I'm not going to have a problem. And you're not hearing out there that's a bad thing. I did get the Delta vaccine because the death rate was about 1 in 1,500, and I thought, well, it's probably a reasonable idea to do. But I do know people had problems. A pastor friend of mine got myocarditis from it, you know, and other things. You did hear it. But on the other hand, you know, I've heard of people that died that didn't get it. So
right.
I don't know. There's so many articles on both sides of it. Oh, now an interesting thing, you know, everyone was talking about, you know, the MAGA hat folks are wanting to buy, what's the product you can get at the vets? To prevent.
Oh yeah, hydric something or high.
I've just drawn a blank. Okay, well anyway, so they were giving us a hard time about it, right? However, Spain did a study and discovered 100,000 people took this stuff like every month, a dose or so, and the mortality rate. Yeah, ivermectin. Yeah, the rate was 1/10 that of everybody else. So ivermectin is a great preventer of the illness, and just because all the one side of the political side was jumping on the other, I hate it when people do that because you really screw everybody ultimately.
Well, I mean, if Trump was against ivermectin, they'd have been for it.
Exactly. If he was,
well, no, if the Democrats had picked it up on there, then the Republicans probably wouldn't like it, or vice versa. You know?
I mean that's the way the game's played.
I don't want to go too far into that because I think so much of that was just politically and financially motivated.
Yeah.
That unfortunately, if they had just let doctors do what doctors do and say, okay, we have this vaccine we're working on, work with your doctors to decide if it's your best choice or not. That didn't happen, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah, that's it. All right, let's go to the next slide then.
That's exactly what I'm intending on doing. There you are, building a house.
Now this is an illustration. Okay. The DNA in this illustration are the plans that they're holding in their hands, right? It's got the plans and everything to how to build different rooms. But the contractors are able to make changes to that plan. So they may decide they're building say you've been to any average neighborhood, and they don't want them all to look identical, right? So they may add a room here or a garage there to make them look differently. Well, the epigenetics is their ability to do those things, right? And with those same tools, you can pretty much make all the same houses that you want, or all the different houses that you want. And that's the difference between DNA. DNA is a toolkit. Epigenetics plays the toolkit.
Okay, so you're using all of the same materials, but epigenetics may move the doorway 3 feet farther one direction or something like that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
In this analogy, say the guy in blue has an epigenetic error in him. He starts making the rooms the wrong way. That would be a cancer.
So the blueprint is the DNA.
Yeah.
Or the DNA is the blueprint, and the epigenetics is the toolkit.
Correct.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Not to, I don't want to open up that can of worms we almost opened up a minute ago when we were talking about ivermectin, but I think if there's one takeaway that at least I think I have from the whole controversy is the question of how much of science ends up being political and how much of what's political ends up really being religious.
Okay, well, that's a great question. And in fact, it's very political. You cannot write an article that went against neo-Darwinism, basically. Okay.
And then how much of what the politics of it is really religious? I mean, it's like we can't allow God in the door here.
Correct. And it is real religious from that standpoint. Now, the greatest mistake, in my opinion, that's ever occurred is junk DNA. It shut down research. And guess what? Francis Collins, who's a Christian, he's a Christian theist.
Theistic evolution?
Theistic Christian, which means he believes in evolution. And he's very critical of other Christians that don't believe in evolution. Okay, so he does the NIH Human Genome Project, 11 years in the making, $7 billion. I mean, 11 years. And at the end of it, he did not recognize the 98% of the DNA that was junk DNA. They caught on to him later, and he said, in terms of junk, so we don't use that term anymore. It was pretty much a case of hubris to think that we could just dismiss stuff. I mean, what an embarrassment. Your theory of evolution did that, and it set him back.
But he's now saying we can't dismiss it as junk, even though he dismissed it as junk. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. That's one of the most colossal failures of neo-Darwinism I can ever.
But that means he left 98% of the job unfinished, though.
That's right. Okay. Now another group came out called the Encore Project, and they studied the 98%, and they discovered that 85% of that 98% was making RNA, different types of RNA.
So that's called the Encore Project?
Encore, ENCOR. Now, the Encore has about 12,000 citations, still only about a 20th of what Epigenetics has, but they've got an enormous amount. And when they came out, do you think the evolutionists were happy about it? Heck no. They were writing protest articles and all kinds of stuff, and nobody's listening to those guys because Encore's data is incredible. 9,000 people utilized it.
But the Encore Project, is that their mission to disprove Darwinianism?
No, their mission was to take a peek at the 98% that the Human Genome Project overlooked.
So you don't want to do that, though, because that might show us something we don't want to know about.
Well, that's true, but scientists still want to do something great, right? and even I mean, they're not. Now, I mean, on the one hand, Francis Collins was definitely motivated by his Darwinistic thinking. Okay, so he did it according to that. These other guys said, no, we want to look at it as maybe this stuff has function you haven't found. Because when the Human Genome Project finished, they said, we've only got about 30,000 genes, and it does not explain all the complexity of man. There's something else going on.
I remember that. I remember them saying that, now we're just beginning to unravel it. Well, it sounds like we've just unraveled about 98% of it.
Yeah, that's what OnCode did. Human Genome, you can type in Human Genome Project in your Google bar, and you'll find 10 articles that say what a colossal failure was.
Really? Now, I want to say, did you say OnCode or Encore?
OnCode. ENCODE.
I wrote it wrong. Thanks.
Okay, now we have another slide. I don't know how many we have left, but I thought you might want to look at this one because it's doing some interesting things as I look at it here.
This is just kind of a GIF that I found that shows epigenetics and how a tags can turn things on and turn things off. And you get different cell types. You see the round ones and the scaly ones and other types. So it's just a nice analogy.
Okay. So it's just turning stuff on and off is all it's doing.
Okay. Now, here's where we get back to the argument that you were talking about. Are we like a chimpanzee? And on your right, for 50 years, we studied the DNA letters and said, okay, well, we've got so many DNA letters that's the same as the next guy. Well, look at humans and chimps. They're humans and humans are 99.9%. Humans and chimps are 99.8%. Okay, but then look at the humans and dogs, 94%.
I think earthworms are 88%.
Yeah, are we 94% looking like a dog? And then to really take it to the absurd, on the right-hand side, this is a daffodil. And we share 35% the same genes as a daffodil. But are we a daffodil? You see a little face in here.
I've seen a couple of,
Okay, so this field is called comparative genomics. And this was what we did. We didn't know about epigenetics.
Well, wait a minute now. Let me back up here. When you say we have 98.8% genetic similarity with the chimp, we're only talking about how much of the DNA, though, that we because that's not the part that was supposedly junk, right?
That's true. That we weren't studying the junk DNA. We were only comparing the actual what we call the exons of the DNA.
So that's a very limited slice of the pie, isn't it?
Yeah, and when you look at the junk DNA, you get into all these things called transposons, which are probably viral in origin. And they shuffle the DNA like shuffling a deck of cards, and they can make certain things turn on and turn off, and epigenetics works with them. The symphony is so complex, everybody's kind of standing back in awe of what we're discovering. So
this is pretty awesome.
So then you have this. Why is this important? Comparative epigenetics.
Well, it's useless to do comparative genomics because otherwise we're 35%. We need to know the epigenetic tags on top of it. And in the next slide, I'll explain why.
Okay. I can do that. There you go.
Okay, here's the queen bee middle and the workers around them. Now, did you know that the queen bee and the workers have identical DNA? They're absolutely identical. Okay, the workers will make what's called a royal jelly first, and they feed it to the larvae as a queen, and it grows up to be a queen. I mean, it had the potential of being different things, but the jelly made it become a queen. That's epigenetics, external factors changing the way things are turned on to make the muscles bigger or the body change. So they have identically the same genetics, but different epigenetics on top of it. So that's the difference. It's a huge difference, right? Now you understand why the daffodil analogy and even the chimp, because the chimps have we have a lot of different non-coding DNA from chimps that have to do with our brains and other things. And it does not take a large amount to make things completely different. So just doing like they used to do, say, oh, we're 98% the same as a chimp, therefore we're from chimps, is a ridiculous argument. Okay. This is actually into what our talk is about, and that's epigenetics, the sins of the father. Okay, Nature Journal again comes out about the same time as that first journal came out, and they were recognizing that epigenetic changes are passed on from the father to the child. We see Bart Simpson and Homer riding on a bicycle and on a motorbike, and Bart's going to be just like his dad because of these trends.
Well, we are getting close to the end of the time here. We have about a minute left, but I thought this was an important one to bring up.
Well, this is in Exodus 20, and it talks about the 10 Commandments, but it says, if you hate me, I'll visit the sins of the father to the third and the fourth generations. And we've discovered, studying rats and other things, that these certain epigenetic tendencies go on 3 to 4 generations. And that's why they wrote that article like that. And they quoted Exodus. If you can imagine how many people rolled over in their graves, so to speak, quoting the Bible with genetics. You know, it's showing up.
No, don't do that. Okay, I want to show one more slide. This is fascinating. And I was concerned, as you recall, that we're going to have an overload of information. My pastor calls these kind of fire hose sermons. But this is kind of intriguing here.
Okay, and during the Nazi occupation of Denmark, the Danish doctors were phenomenal. They really recorded everything, the weights and everything, and they discovered that depending on where, and during the third trimester, depending on what circumstance you were, determined how the kids turned out. If you were starving to death during the third trimester, then your kids were thinner, more schizophrenia and mental illnesses. If, on the other hand, during the trimester, you just made it through the Nazis and were eating like crazy, guess what? Your kids came out obese and having heart disease and other things. So, and they're still following these people. It's the sin of the father, the third and fourth generation all over again. And we're actually doping it out from the hunger situation in Denmark. We do this in mice, of course, and we can see it quicker.
Yeah.
So,
all right, good. Now, for those who might be interested in more reading on this, we have links to Dr. Mancha's various websites, not all of them, but several of them. And that will kind of get you started. And I think one can lead you to another as you go through that. We'll likely have you on again in the future because this is really fascinating. So it's not arguing against changes that some might call evolutionary, but it's really saying what we perceive as evolutionary changes are really epigenetics at work, turning stuff on and off.
correct. We were totally missing the boat. It's
Right.
epigenetics all along.
Wow. All right, Ron, would you do the favor of waltzing us out of here?
Oh, I would be glad to do that. Let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and The Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polygamus. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, OD Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Joe Leg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is wiretapping, and original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happen.
Maybe Dr. Vaughn Mancha can find something epigenetic to explain it. I don't know.
Yeah, well, what are you going to say? So, all right, everyone, we will see you all next week.